Hello and welcome to the Colts Cover-2 podcast. I'm Joel A. Erickson. I'm joined, as always, by Nate Atkins. There's a lot of storylines with the Colts this week. Some of them are the same as last week. Anthony Richardson, Jonathan Taylor. I'm going to start here, Nate. There's been a lot of talk about the Colts defense, what they do, what they don't do. Gus Bradley tried to explain a lot of what they did. I give him credit for giving us a lot of detail on their defensive plan for the Jaguars game. On the flip side of it, it's disconcerting that they called a bunch of different stuff and it didn't work. I think something should work. But there's been so much talk about the scheme. I kind of want to start here. When you're watching football, which defenses do you get excited to watch when it's like whoever's playing on Monday night or Thursday night or whenever we have a chance to watch games?
There's a few different ones. One of them just fired the guy who runs the defense, so I don't know if I'll enjoy watching the New York Jets as much anymore. But that's been one of my favorite ones. They're top 5 in like everything, and they've been that under Robert Saleh, which continued from 49ers days. That's interestingly enough, that is, as we know, Robert Saleh is super close with Gus Bradley. That has been an offshoot of the Gus Bradley defense, but it's a more aggressive and more modern version in some ways. You could say the same thing for DeMeco Ryans, who came from the same place. Those two defenses are kind of cooking right now. Both of them are the top 5 in yards per attempt allowed. So that's, I think, one of the bigger complaints with the Colts right now is just how easy it is to get free releases and completions on just with the way that they use these corners, who are also not, exactly the strength of the team. But the Texans and the Jets don't always play that way. I think they disguise their coverages a lot better, and it's crazy. The Jets have allowed 2 touchdown passes so far. So just interesting that you would fire the defensive-minded head coach when that's the case, but I don't know what's going on over in New York. But those two defenses are Texans and Jets, I think is the best version of what you would, the dream and the idea of what the Colts were supposed to be. And then, of course, some of the other answers are what, probably everyone would say. I mean, everyone loves watching Steve Spagnuolo's defenses, just with as much, they disguise more than anything, and just have safeties that fly all the way around the field. The Browns defense is fun. Just it's not played as well this year as last year, but just the way that they live in man coverage and they dare you to beat them that way, and they've got the cornerbacks to do it. That's like how everybody wants a defense to play, but not a lot of defenses have the cornerbacks to be able to play that way. And then I guess the last one I'll throw in here, the Vikings right now with Brian Flores they're cooking. They added Stephon Gilmore to the mix, and it's sort of a perfect fit. He's running the version of the Bill Belichick style defense, but he's been one of the few assistants to leave from New England to be able to run that somewhere else. Those are the ones that are finding a way to get it done, and they're all in some ways living in too high shells to take away explosives, but they're also finding other ways to be aggressive within that. With either some press coverage disguises, and just some of the games they play up front. So. Really, I think with all those, what's the defining characteristic is how creative they are up front, dialing up pressure, not always blitzing, but just the games and stunts and different maneuvers they do up front. I think that's kind of what makes it so fun, is that they just are throwing a lot in the face of the quarterback and seeing how they want to deal with it.
Yeah, Spagnuolo is one that I think has always been fun for me to watch. I think Dennis Allen in New Orleans is a fun one for me to watch when it's on. There's the aggression, the blitzing from him that you see sometimes is something that I like to watch. And then the other one, you might have said this already. I apologize if you did. Mike McDonald in Seattle. That's kind of like he was kind of the hot defensive name. He ended up being the Seattle head coach. He actually apparently doesn't necessarily blitz that much. but they simulate pressure a lot. So there's lots of rushes where they rush 4, but they're dropping people. They're bringing people from weird spots. He coached with Wink Martindale and kind of adapted some of those principles and kind of put it into a 2-high system. And I think that's, I kind of like watching that. I just like I don't know if it's the right thing or not with everybody playing back. I like defenses. I tend to like defenses that are attacking. And specifically attacking in the pass rush and blitzing some, like, for example, the Saints. The Saints, you think of them as they gotta have bigger defensive ends. Those guys generally handle the pass rush, but Demario Davis, the linebacker, the off-ball linebacker, had 6.5 sacks last year and the year before. In the 4 years before that, he had 3 sacks, 4 sacks, 4 sacks, and 5 sacks. Now, I think Demario Davis is probably one of the more underrated players in the NFL, honestly. And really basically because the Saints haven't been good enough to get him in there. But like, just all of that bringing people. I kind of liked when I was covering the Saints and covering Allen that they would get into late game situations and blitz when most people would play back. Generally with a high rate of success, although I think some coaches kind of caught on and started calling stuff that way. That's generally what I prefer to see. This is where I was going to go with this. Based on a question I asked Shane Steichen the other day, I don't know if he agrees with me on what he wants to see from a defense. So I asked him, I've had this inkling for a while. I think we might have talked about it on the podcast, but I asked him what he wants, like how he views defense. And his hallmarks were limit explosive plays and keep the points down, which is super general, but the limit explosive plays thing, like when they played Atlanta last year, we asked about blitzing more, and he said something like he'd rather limit the explosives and keep everything in front. I don't know. Maybe I'm extrapolating too far off of not much of an answer, but I feel like Steichen kind of wants his defense to play back and make people drive the length of the field. Is that what you kind of got from him?
Honestly, it's been hard to get a lot of insight from Shane on the defensive side of the ball or any player on it since he got here. So that'd be my best guess, is that he lives in the world of, create explosives, limit explosives. But yeah, if that's the case, then it's interesting that they went with, a single high defense as much as they want to run it. And they've done more too high than Gus Bradley has in the past, but not, there's some teams that just live in too high shells. And that's the idea of, we're just going to take away the deep ball, make you drive the length of the field. And the hope being in the course of all that, you'll either have a penalty or you'll have a turnover. You'll make some.
That's kind of the
cost.
That's kind of the Fangio tree, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's
the Fangio tree is a lot too high.
Yeah. So Vic Fangio, that's a lot of defenses have adopted from that. It's in everyone keeps moving more toward that, even when they're not that. So some of those defenses I mentioned, like the Jets and the Texans, they've done more of that than maybe they would have at the start. And so, like I said, Gus Bradley has done more of that than he did at the start, but maybe not. Maybe it's not sort of his go-to approach. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's aggressiveness. It depends. Like you can take it to, like, Wink Martindale kind of wore out his welcome in the NFL because he took it to a level where he wanted to run a high amount of cover 0 with the blitz. And that is like a complete all or nothing approach. You talk to DBs, they really hate playing in cover 0. So if you want to live in cover 1, that's, more acceptable. You still normally need to have like really good outside corners to play that much man coverage, not on third downs. But my main thing is I think I like coaches who are willing to disguise things and who are just going to throw you something unpredictable. So that tends to be a flavor of aggressiveness, but I think it becomes binary sometimes in the conversation where it's like you're either blitzing a lot and therefore you're aggressive, or you're not blitzing and you're not aggressive. I like to see something in the middle of that where the blitzes come just in surprising moments and in different ways. So that's what I think the Colts should employ, not like a high number of blitzes necessarily, but blitzes at the right moments and blitzes that build off the skill set of the players they have. So when Kenny Moore is out there, I think he's a great blitzing skill set. But even when he's not, I'd like to see them do it with Nick Cross or EJ Speed, just something to where the post snap picture is different than what the pre snap picture is telling them. Because specific to the Colts defense, I think if we get into that specifically, there's a certain script out there right now that offenses are using to kill them, and I think the best defenses out there, part of it is that they have some stars who can help make up for this, on each of these defenses I mentioned, but they also, I think, switch it up enough, in their coverage disguises and in their pressure disguises and the occasional blitz, and making not all the blitzes the same, not the same down and distance, that's how they end up catching an offense by surprise and either creating the occasional explosive play, or sometimes it's just a play that gets them off the field quicker. So they kind of avoid the slow death. So the issue for the Colts right now is that they're not being aggressive and they're not limiting the explosive plays. So they're sort of like the opposite of either model that we're discussing.
Yeah, I think that's a big piece of this, is like to play back as much as they do and as much as they did on Sunday. You should not be giving up explosive plays. And this is where, like, I think there's probably a reasonable amount of criticism centered around Bradley. Just the numbers kind of speak for themselves. They have not been a good scoring defense in his time here. Matty Rafus's defense was much better, both in terms of yards and scoring. But there's also a piece of this that comes down to, like, Chris Ballard has hamstrung him in ways that just don't really make sense when your defensive coordinator's philosophy is to make everything simple so that you can play fast. Like, if you're going to do that, you got to have really good talent. And last year they rolled the dice with young corners. This year they told us that young corners were old corners and rolled them back again. And ignored the fact that one of the corners struggled with injury his entire rookie season, and then another one of the corners they were counting on was coming off of an Achilles tear. And just like, I just keep thinking, like, everyone's like, well, they should just blitz. And I'm like, I mean, I like to watch blitzes, but also I don't think they can cover it. Yeah. Now they sometimes can't cover when they have help. Christian Kirk had safety and a corner chasing him the other day on a 61-yard catch. So it's not quite that simple. Sometimes when they put help out there, they can't cover. But that sort of speaks to what I'm saying. Like, if they can't cover people when they do have help over the top, what are they going to do when they don't? I don't know. Like, Bradley and his scheme and what they haven't been able to do is definitely to blame for this. But I think Chris Ballard, we kind of dipped into this when we got into the too much blame and too little blame the other day on the First Impressions podcast. But Chris Ballard failing to give Bradley enough to work with is also culpable here. Like, just going back to last year, the end of last year, when we asked why is Gus Bradley still here, Chris Ballard's answer was, I didn't give him enough in the secondary. And then he proceeded to go out and not give him enough in the secondary.
Yeah, and then we followed up on that in April when they had not signed anybody, and they had, they're heading into the draft, but they'd not added any players to that secondary after. It sounds like he kind of promised. And usually with Ballard, when he says, like, what he says in these pressers tends tends to be like how he actually feels. Usually the moves they make, you can go back and find a kernel of something he said before that indicated that was going to happen. But with this one, that did not have that feel. And so he was asked in April about it, about not, what was the reason why you didn't add any corners for Gus Bradley when you said you were going to. And his answer was, quote, well, a lot of that was what's available and the circumstance available. I think getting Dallas Flowers back will help. Goes on to say, Dallas Flowers, we're hoping to get him healthy, and the rest of these guys aren't rookies anymore. And 5 games later, Dallas is not on the roster anymore. So just a curious approach to that. It felt like at a certain point, it seemed like he just really wanted to make this group work against all signs and logic saying that it would not work. My criticism.
Sorry, my fault. But Dallas Flowers looked bad in training camp.
Oh yeah, well he was in a healthy scratch the first week of the season.
Yeah,
because he looked like he couldn't play in training camp, and then they started playing him because that was the week that Juju Brents went down with the knee injury. So he's just like the guy you slide in there, but they've never believed in him very much. They played this year because of the Achilles. They played Sam Womack over him more, but then they got in a spot on Sunday where they can't play Samuel Womack every single snap. So they wanted to get, they've played Dallas 89 snaps over the past 4 games. And it just got to a certain point where teams know to go after that. Like, they do their homework. They know this guy's coming off an Achilles tear, or how he looked, in the preseason. He tends to be a guy who's Dallas specifically is an aggressive player who in the past has been able to play a little bit that way because he has the recovery speed. He doesn't have it anymore. It's this defense. I did my mailbag today, and someone asked kind of who's accountable for this defense being this bad. And what I was trying to explain is when you rank 32nd out of 32 teams in something, there is not one answer to that. It's kind of everything happening at once. And I think what we're seeing here is the Colts have a high number of injuries, specifically to players they cannot afford to be without, such as DeForest Buckner and Kenny Moore. And you could throw Juju Brents in there probably the way that has played out, that other outside corner spot. That has mixed with a complete lack of depth at all of those positions has now made the drop. It's not that you just don't have Juju Brents or Kenny Moore, it's that you're dropping off to guys like Dallas Flowers or Chris Lamons who are on practice squads or really just not very playable at a defensive level in today's NFL. So you have injuries meet lacking depth, meet the lack of creativity in the scheme to adjust for it. And so what you end up having is teams go out against the Colts right now, and the Colts are playing simple because they have young players and backup players stepping in, and they want to keep this simple so they don't have a coverage bust. And teams know exactly that. They know when they're getting cover 3. They know when they're getting a 4-man rush. They know that 4-man rush does not have DeForest Buckner and Samson Ebicom and Kwity Paye to it. They know they can go max protect if they need to get off Leatu Latu. And 3 things are just killing the Colts right now that go back to the end of last year. Teams found this out about them. The games against the Bengals and the Falcons, that is in the Texans, and that is carried over to this year, which is you can run quick game on them because they play their corners back, and that's how you negate that pass rush. You can run screens on them, which also attacks the corners playing back and the aggressiveness of that pass rush to try to make up for them. And you can do max protect, and you only need a couple guys in the route, and they're eventually going to get open. And this team is they're not switching up those coverages. They're not switching up the alignment of the DBs, the blitz rate, not enough. I know Gus Bradley has pushed back and points out that they have run some different coverages, but it doesn't look all that much different. It's like teams seem to know what they're hunting for, and that's why the completion rates especially for anybody who's a veteran quarterback. The completion rates have been really, really high, kind of dating back to the end of last year. So it's one of those things in the NFL, like we say this all the time. If you have shown consistently that you cannot do something, teams will see that on tape and they will make you prove that you can do it, or they'll just keep doing it against you until you can prove otherwise. So screen passes, quick game, and max protect, we're going to see a lot of. And then when you mix in the run defense and tackling issues on top of that, this defense can't really get out of its own way right now. There's not an area where they're winning. And when it's that way, like offenses feel like they can call whatever they want to call against them. They can dial up explosives. They can bleed clock. They can run to the edge. They can play quick game. They can throw a screen in behind you. They could extend the play and have a receiver break open. Kind of everything is there right now because, again, the team has injuries mixed with bad depth, mixed with a team that's not adjusting. And this is where we're at.
They get a Titans offense that has been pretty bad. At the same time, and you pointed this out very smartly on Sunday night, they've played bad offenses before.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of what they've played so far is bad offenses. And so going up against a rehabbing Will Levis and a Titans team that doesn't really push the ball down the field and also turns the ball over a lot, it should be a get-right game for the defense. It's just hard to expect that right now with the way they've been playing.
Yeah, and especially to me, the concerning trend is the way they've been playing on the road. So they've struggled in some different spots, but it's one thing when the Texans come into their building and CJ Stroud makes some plays, but you take it back to the end of last year, and you can't always do that, but you can with this team because they rolled back the same thing as last year. Everything is the same about last year's defense, with the only exception being Leatu Latu is here and Samson Ebukam is not. And they have Raekwon Davis, who plays some snaps at nose tackle. And everything else is pretty much what they were back then. And go back to the end of last year, they've lost 4 straight games on the road. And if you think about those games against the Bengals, Falcons, Packers, and Jaguars, they have a few things in common. Screen passes are a huge, huge part of it. Run defense falls off a cliff. So we saw 100-yard games out of Bijan Robinson, Josh Jacobs, and Tank Bigsby, especially the later the game went on. So there's sort of like, you think about like since that stretch started, when the Colts have had good moments on defense, they've been situational plays at Lucas Oil Stadium where the defense seemed to dial in that moment with a crowd at its back, and someone would make a play to get off the field to force a turnover. That happened against the Steelers and the Bears. And what helped them is those were not great offenses, so there were some personal mismatches, but they took advantage of them, and they made the plays that happen. When they're going on the road right now, it just seems like they're losing something in the focus and juice in the run defense, and that adds up into all those other issues that are present in every game with how max protect can negate their pass rush some, how they play kind of static and basic in coverage, so to attack them with quick game and screens. You can extend the play on them, and their corners have a hard time holding up. All that's true home or on the road, but the run defense in the tackling has really, really come to roost on the road, dating back to the end of last year. So that, to me, would be the concern this week, is that the Titans are not a good offense, and they should, in theory, be able to get after Will Levis, especially if Kwity Paye and Kenny Moore are playing. They were back at practice. They should have some advantages, to make, but they are going up against the Titans offense that runs that wide zone run scheme. Bill Callahan is over there, one of the best offensive line coaches in the NFL. Their offensive line has not been very good, but coming off the bye week, if they take a step forward and they start to run the ball in ways that some of these teams have, that's going to be problematic. They've faced a bet. The Malik Willis Packers didn't seem like a great offense either, but they were able to kill them with that one simple formula of run early and keep your quarterback out of dangerous situations. So really, this game's very simple on that side of the ball is can they put Will Levis in dangerous situations? Because he will put the ball out there and he will create dangerous plays. But if the Titans are playing with the lead, who knows? They may be able to get away from that and kind of use the same script the Packers did to beat this team if they're not careful.
Yeah, just talking real quick about that Titans passing game. So when Levis is at the helm, and I'm gonna throw a little water on the whole way. Mason Rudolph did a great thing for them. Mason Rudolph averaged 5 yards per attempt. That's despicable. They won that last game because the Dolphins are a mess without Tua. But the Will Levis version, so the Will Levis version of the Titans offense, let's look at the passing game real fast. So he turns the ball over a ton. He's got 9 turnovers already, 6 interceptions, 3 fumbles. He's been sacked 15 times in 4 games. Those 2 stats suggest someone who's trying to push it down the field too much, looking for big plays, trying to get big plays, that sort of thing. Except here's the problem. Like Anthony Richardson hasn't taken the sacks. He does have the interceptions. Anthony Richardson's yards per attempt is 8.5. He absolutely is pushing the ball downfield. Richardson's air yards are at 10.9 or something like that. Intended air yards. Levis is averaging 6.2 yards per attempt. Their longest pass play on the season is 40 yards, and their top 2 receivers are running backs. So they are getting all of the mistakes of a big play passing game with none of the big plays. Their running backs have, I think, 13 and 12 catches between them. Neither is averaging more than 7 yards per catch. It's not a good passing game. The thing is, like, the Colts can make bad passing games look good.
I was going to say, this sounds very familiar to last week's podcast when you laid out the Jaguars' offensive stats, and it became a get-right game for them. So that's what I'm talking about with the run game specifically, is that the difference there is that Trevor Lawrence, we have seen him play well in the past, especially he specifically seems to have the Colts number here. But, in a way that you wouldn't say Will Levis does, but the same thing applies that if the Titans can get their run game going, that'll be a lot different. And the other thing too is one guy who I think does kind of have the Colts number a little bit is Calvin Ridley, and Calvin Ridley has not really gotten going yet. He only has 9 catches on 19 targets. He's been all right, I guess, 7.4 yards per target, which is better than most of the guys in this passing game. But yeah, it's one of those, like, that player's been hard for these corners to cover stylistically because he's a route runner separation type, and their corners are built. Well, the ones he's faced, Juju Brents and Jalen Jones, are those kind of hulking players who aren't built for space. Samuel Womack is on Calvin Ridley. That's a little better, I think, just stylistically. He is the type of player I think who's going to give Jalen Jones some issues. But yeah, we just have to see. I mean, it's going to be one of those where this is a real test for whether the Colts have a chance of much on defense, because Will Levis does lead the league in picks, and they're not a super productive offense. So if they struggle with this one, it doesn't necessarily mean every single team will light them up, but I do think you have to start looking at, that'd be 5 straight games on the road that this team would have made it very easy on opposing quarterbacks and running backs. And that's the trend that they need to try and break here is find a way to stop the run on the road and find a way to force turnovers on the road. Those things have not traveled as well for them as they would have liked.
Yeah. The funny thing is that they're actually not bad at creating turnovers. They're tied for 6th in the league. That stat shocked me yesterday. The defense has seemed so bad that in my head that they've been much worse than that. But they actually do have
at home though. But they have 1 turnover on the road.
Well, they have
picked off Trevor Lawrence, and I don't think the Packers turned it over.
Yes, they did. They fumbled.
They had a fumble.
Josh Jacobs fumbled going into the things. But you're right. The vast majority, 2 turnovers per game at home, 1 turnover per game on the road. So there's a difference there as well. Flipping it to the other side of the ball, this Titans defense has been pretty good.
Yeah.
Now, I will say this. They have played bad offenses for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
With the exception of Green Bay, which Green Bay didn't have Jordan Love, but Matt LaFleur is pretty good just in general. But they've gotten the Dolphins without Tua Tagovailoa. They got the Bears in the opener when they didn't really know what was going on. Is their second game Denver? Is that the one I'm missing?
Jets.
The Jets. Yeah, I don't know what the Jets are. I don't know what the Jets are. The Jets are a fired coach and an old quarterback right now.
Yeah, well, they fired the head of the defense, so I'm guessing the offense must be great, right?
Yeah. So they haven't exactly played a murderer's row of offenses, but the numbers are really good, especially against the pass. They're only giving up 124 yards per game against the pass. Their rate stats are almost as good. They've played some, they've got L'Jarius Sneed back there. They've got Harold Landry has 4. The Packers are a good offense. We have to give them that. The Packers are tied for 4th in the league in yards. They've got Harold Landry who's got 4 sacks. Braden Smith has knee and ankle injuries. I don't know what to expect there because he's kind of banged up every week and he still plays. But he struggled last week against Trayvon Walker. If he does play, he probably needs help. But yeah, so the other offenses they played, Chicago's 26th in the NFL, the Jets are 27th, and Miami is 21st. And they obviously don't have Tua Tagovailoa. Some people out there might be like, well, the Colts aren't that great in offense. The Colts are 13th in the league in offense, and they're 5th in yards per play. Richardson, Flacco, whoever, it's a team that can it depends. Some of it depends on Jonathan Taylor, but it's a team that can put up points on you in the blink of an eye. So that matchup, I think, is a little bit of a test for them. Green Bay was a little bit of a test. It was Malik Willis. No matter who the quarterback is, I feel like the Colts are going to test the Titans a little bit, test the Titans defense a little bit, just based on who else they played and when they played them.
Well, it's an interesting matchup stylistically because the Titans' pass defense has been amazing at stopping teams, but not really a playmaking defense. So they only have
no turnovers.
No turnovers and only 9 sacks. So Harold Landry is like half those. He's a problem, but they haven't really gotten it outside of him. And yet you look at the kind of the rate stats, they're number 1 in yards per attempt. They are number 1 in fewest first downs allowed. They are number 1 in they're the only one of only 2 defenses not allowed a 40-yard pass play, and they're tied for the fewest 20-yard plays given up. So you think about the way the Colts win is explosive plays. They've kind of gotten to them in every game outside of, I guess, the Packers game, but they usually like you give them 4 quarters, even last game where it felt like the most conservative thing for 3 quarters, and then all of a sudden they light it up with Alec Pierce. Like they tend to get to some, and everything about the Titans is finding ways to take that away, and that's sort of the strength of their secondary. I think it's strength and experience of their secondary. They're the team that went out, traded for L'Jarius Sneed, and signed Quandre Diggs, and those guys are just making it very hard to complete passes and move the ball. But they haven't done the things that have gotten the Colts in trouble either, which is the turnovers. So one of these is going to win out. Either the Colts will get their explosive plays, and we'll learn that it was that the Titans were due for some regression because they faced some bad and especially unexplosive offenses, Or maybe the Titans, this is their opportunity to get some of those turnovers going now that they're facing a team that hunts for explosive plays and has a very, very young quarterback. I'm assuming Anthony Richardson's going to play this week. That's just, we will see how the week goes. I'm much more confident than this week than last week. Either way, if it's Joe Flacco, he still is a guy who in his history has put the ball, in harm's way. So yeah, it's going to be that side of the ball is going to be pretty telling because if the Colts can't, I think there's only so much they're going to be able to do on defense right now with the injury situations that they have. And some of these issues schematically and in their depth, it's just not all going to get solved this week. They have to try and get incrementally better, but they have to hit a certain level with their offense and production. And that's what's going to be a real test of how legit is this Titans defense, and can this Colts offense, can they put this stuff together? Can they hunt for their explosives through the air and find some semblance of a run game? And if Anthony Richardson's back, you would like to think that plays into their ability to get a run game going, even if it's, with the running backs, but there's that free blocker from Anthony Richardson playing, or maybe they choose to run Anthony a little bit. That's kind of the ongoing dilemma that they have, is how much do you run him with the way that some of these injuries have piled up. But it's some of it's just hard to break down, though, because we don't know who all will be out there. Like Jonathan Taylor didn't practice today. It's an ankle sprain. He missed all last week. So who knows? If they don't have Jonathan Taylor, and that's the same thing goes. They were without Josh Downs and Michael Pittman to start the week. So they need some guys back. They really need, those are you could say the three most important players, three most important non-quarterbacks to this offense. So those are the guys who make it home. I mean, Alec Pierce is up there too. I shouldn't leave him out. Those are the guys who are going to give them a little consistency, though. The volume guys, and they've been great. Downs especially has been just great at solving the dilemma they faced with zone coverage. And I think what they need to do is, through Josh Downs and Michael Pittman on short and intermediate throws, running the ball with, if they can get Jonathan Taylor back, or keeping the run game out there with Anthony Richardson and whatever running backs out there with him, they have to just kind of keep their defense as rested as possible and off the field, where I just think right now this run defense it just looks worn down. It looks like it's backups playing, it's guys playing through some things. And when they're on the road, they don't seem to have that juice from the crowd. And just later in games, especially, they just seem like they don't have it as much. So it's like, can the Colts offense find a way to be occasionally explosive, but also stay on the field? That's kind of been this ongoing discussion with them. And it's basically, we're asking them to be really good at everything. But that's just kind of the model they need to hunt for when the defense has as many issues and injuries and solutions they need as they do right now.
Yeah, the run game, Taylor, because I think there's an opportunity in the run game. I think there's a real opportunity in the run game for the offense, but that's contingent on Taylor being there. Trey Sermon was dealing with a collarbone today and did not practice. I'm going to assume that's a bruised collarbone. I don't know if I saw him in the locker room today to see if he had his hand in a sling, but I would assume that's a bruised collarbone because they didn't announce it. You would think that if he broke it, they would have said something. But yeah, I think there's especially with Richardson, obviously, I think there's an opportunity. But also, you look at some of the teams that they've played so far. Chicago can't run the ball. They're awful at it. I believe the Jets have been pretty bad so far running the ball. Rushing yards per game. The Jets are dead last. So I was right. They've been bad. The Bears are 29th, and Miami's been okay. but not on a per play basis. On a per play basis, Miami's 25th because they don't have the threat of the pass. The one team that they've played so far that's good at running the football is the Green Bay Packers, who are third in the NFL in rushing and fifth in yards per carry. And the Packers got 188 rushing yards on. So I think there's a real opportunity there, but it's contingent on Jonathan Taylor. And this goes back to what we've been saying about the backup running back thing for a long time. Why didn't they get a better player in the event that Taylor was banged up? Why?
The thing is, you were almost certainly not getting 17 games out of Jonathan Taylor. That would be the miracle situation. So they're always going to have a game or two like this.
That would be true. That would be true even if he didn't have the ankle stuff. Like running backs don't play 17 games because it's running back.
And the other guy that you're counting on in your run game is the quarterback who also has the injury concerns. And so last game they were without both of them and couldn't really do much on the ground. So yeah, I don't know. It's a lot of this is just rehashing debates we had this spring when the moves didn't come in. I mean, there is not a good answer other than it doesn't take a lot for this front office to fall in love with the players it has and count on them for bigger roles. And last year, Trey Sermon and Tyler Goodson had a good game against the Steelers. And so here they are, just move them up the line, I guess. This is where they're really paying for it because, I mean, like a game like this, if Anthony Richardson is out there, but there's no Jonathan Taylor, I mean, do you run Anthony Richardson more? Because you got to create something on the ground, but he's coming off the hip and oblique injuries. Like that was a scary scenario beyond just the running backs falling off and not playing well in their own way. The scary scenario to me with how they built that room was they're going to put more on Anthony Richardson to make up for that. And, but it's good. That's also hard because I think what we've seen in the moments when he has been, when he's played with a running back who's not either Jonathan Taylor. I would even put Zach Moss in this. If it's not Jonathan Taylor, the defense usually forces him to hand the ball off. So they kind of take Anthony Richardson out of that. And in theory, that would help the running back out. But still, there's got to be something more than that. I mean, they tried that against the do you think about D'Anthony's first start? That's when Deion Jackson was the lead running back. Deion Jackson, Evan Hull, and that did not work.
Nope, put that out of my brain. It's gone. Got rid of it.
Well, it's just proof that like the whole Anthony Richardson will just open up the lanes for any running back to run. That's not something to really bank on either. So I don't know. I mean, Tyler Goodson I thought looked better than Trey Sermon. Maybe they'll give him more run, especially if Trey is dealing with his own injury. And who knows? Maybe Anthony Richardson is more fresh than we think. Maybe after 2 weeks off, he'll come out there and they'll just be able to run him and he'll stay on the field. I mean, that's the hope. But this is where I think it's really important to have Michael Pittman and Josh Downs because they have to take some of the effect or the role of the run game, just these consistent chain hitting passes. And then, obviously Anthony Richardson's got to show if he's out there that he's got to show he can hit those consistently the way Joe Flacco has to, get them the ball and let them do that. But we'll see on those. I mean, Michael Pittman, I know he's rested a back before, managed that. I don't know if that's a new injury or just more maintenance. They are looking out for ways to kind of maintain him a little bit more since they've run into some early season wear and tear with him. But Josh Downs is dealing with a toe injury, and I noticed that on Sunday coming out of the game, and then he missed practice today. And it's a little tricky injury. We'll see how serious it is, but his game is very much built on those feet and the change of direction. It's why they rested him on the ankle till he got to about 6 weeks. So that is tricky if that's lingering or if that's something that could hold him out. Either way, if either of those guys are either not out there or just limited and you don't have Jonathan Taylor, again, someone's got to take some of the volume of the whole offense. And that's where I think the spotlight's going to shift to A.D. Mitchell a little bit more. And he's off to a tricky start so far. You talk about people with something to prove. he really has to prove that he can play through contact and play at this level, produce at this level, I should say. We've seen him get open, and we know he has the skill set to get open. But in terms of cashing in on volume, you're going to have to be able to take some catches across the middle, especially when teams are playing them in zone like this. So this could be a game where the spotlight goes to him a little bit more too.
Yeah. So my high school defensive coordinator used to do this thing to us in the film room. It was miserable whenever it happened to you. He would start playing the film, and then halfway through the play, it would suddenly stop, and he would ask if a certain player had made a good play or not. And usually what it was it'd be like a linebacker blows through a block, or a cornerback is in the right position, that kind of thing, and he'd stop it before the play was finished. The one that I remember happening to me, I still have nightmares about this, was there was a screen pass to my side. I was an outside linebacker, and I split 3 blockers and got squared up with the running back. And he would say, is this a good play or not? And inevitably, we're high school kids, we're not smart, because he got us all the time with us. We'd be like, yes, this is a great play. Except for the one person who was involved in the play, because that person would remember it, and then he would play it. And in my case, I missed the tackle. In some of those other cases, it's like a missed tackle. They gave it the completion anyway. And he would go, it's half a great play. And half a great play is no great play. And that's, I think, that's I think a good way of explaining what's going on with AD Mitchell right now. Like, it's great that he can get open, but getting open is not the point of the play. Catching the ball is the point of the play. He's done a terrible job of attacking the football when it's in the air. I don't think you can, you can try to explain it away with, the passes have been bad. You can try to explain it away with, it's not mixed up. I think part of that is him. He's not in the spot he needs to be as a rookie. But you have to make the catch. And I don't really have much more left on this game. Like you said, it kind of feels like we're just rehashing stuff we went through in the offseason. But this is my one last thing I'll say. I think, and the other thing is, this doesn't break any ground. If Alec Pierce has a safety over the top of him and he clears it's basically Pierce versus the safety, Colts quarterback needs to throw it at least a couple of times, even if it looks like the guy's over the top of it. The way Pierce is playing right now, the way he's attacking the ball, 13 catches and 17 targets, you got to give that guy a chance. And I actually want to give JJ Stankovic credit for bringing this up today, because I don't want to take credit for myself. Like, it's not just that he's making the catches now. You know what Alec Pierce has always been very good at? Flipping the defense and making sure the defender doesn't intercept it. He's been good at that going back even last year when everybody hated it. Like, we've all said it. You said it on the podcast the other night. I wrote a whole column about it, basically. They need to give him a few more chances and just see how long this heater lasts, because he's on an unreal heater as far as down the field balls go.
Yeah. Jim Bob Cooter, it was interesting to hear him talk about Alec Pierce and that specific element of his game, the 50-50 ball and all of that. And, he talked about how that is I'm trying to find the exact quote here, but talk about how that's it's a mentality for him. Basically, is the way he described it, is like in the way that Anthony Richardson today said, for most guys with a 50-50 ball, he said for Alec Pierce, it's a 99-1 ball, which that'd be tough to complete 99% of your pass. If that's true, you should throw every ball to him. Get 99 out of 100. That would a 99% completion rate would be very impressive if they could do that. But the reason I bring that up, because first of all, I agree they do need to just try some of that, and that's more or less they have admitted that yes, they need to he's establishing himself to a point where time and place matters, but they're going to need to do that and not wait till they're down 2 touchdowns. But the other reason is that's what we're not seeing with AD Mitchell, is that attitude and confidence to go up and get the ball. And he's young. I mean, you don't want to write the story of his career yet, but it's off to a tough start for AD Mitchell. Interesting fact that our editor Nat Newell found in his research is that A.D. Mitchell has a 30% catch rate right now. The last time a player had a catch rate that low through 5 games was 7 years ago, 2017. So it's off to a tough start. And here's the thing about it is that, again, you do want to take it in the context of he's a rookie. You don't want to put too much on him, but we talk more about these guys because these are the only players the Colts added this offseason. Latu and A.D. Mitchell are here as the new big acquisitions. The only new guys in the starting, potential starters are not due to injury, are the first and second round pick. So the Colts are putting a lot on these guys. With A.D. Mitchell, you hope it's a situation where, again, if you have everybody else out there, if you have Pierce and Pittman and Downs, you'd like to think he could slide back. But they still are going after him. Last game, that was the case. He had 7 targets, kind of because they did the too high shell to take Alec Pierce away. But all it takes is 1 injury, and right now they're dealing with 2 to Michael Pittman and Josh Downs. So at some point, A.D. Mitchell is just going to have to get through that, the concerns of playing through contact, of going up for the ball, because it's on film right now. Defenses are going to hunt for it. And also, he's got to start to earn the trust of the quarterbacks that when we throw you a ball, you're going to make a really strong effort to go get it. Because right now, Michael Pittman and Alec Pierce do that about as well as anybody you'll find in terms of the effort and their ability, at least, like you said, it's not going to be an interception. Like the disaster is going to be, it's just an incompletion. But yeah, that's he needs to kind of earn the trust and earn a role back into this offense. This is a week to do it because he's not going to get every week to be able to answer for that.
One last piece here. I think the Colts have a real opportunity. They're 2-3. They can get to 3-3. More importantly, they can go to 3-3 and push the Titans to 1-4. It's only 6 games in, but if you're paying attention to the AFC standings, beyond like the top 4, not great. Not great. There's a lot of like iffy, gross teams that you think could fall off of a cliff pretty fast in that 5 to 9-ish range. And then below that, there's a bunch of teams that are really struggling. So if you can win this game in Tennessee, if you can get your first division win on the road, you go to 3-3 and put yourself in that wild card mix. And I think you relegate the Titans essentially out of it. If you lose the game, though, you find yourself kind of swimming down there with the Titans in the bottom. Because, I mean, the way Levis is playing, I just can't imagine that they're going to be in the middle of this. But you have a chance. And probably, as much as we've said the defense is playing bad, they have a chance here to put themselves at least in the mix going into the rest of the season for a playoff berth.
Well, their next 2 games are against the Titans and Dolphins, and starting Will Levis and Tyler Huntley should be. So they need to win those games. They need to survive. They need to make those plays and stop these younger struggling quarterbacks. That's what they did like late last season when they got after Mitchell Trubisky and Aiden O'Connell. Like they need to take advantage of the matchups that are in front of them, because if you do that, if they were to win the next 2 games, they'd be 4-3. And like you said, in this AFC, that's right in the mix for something. At least makes you feel like you're in the mix for something. But what's going to be difficult is they need to take advantage of the next 2 weeks, because the 3 games after that are against the Texans, the Vikings, and the Bills, and 2 of the 3 are on the road. That's a lot of loaded wide receivers they're going to face in 3 dome settings, and 2 of which are on the road. So that's tricky. That's going to be a big test, and you hope. And we'll see who can come back then on the defense. But some of these guys are going to be out a while. So they've got to just find a way to survive, I think, a couple games. And I think your hope is that by the time you face that 3-game gauntlet, your offense can be in the place where it's answering some of these, where it's one of those offenses that people fear because of the explosiveness and some consistency in the run game with multiple rushers and some of that underneath game with Josh Downs and Michael Pittman Jr. So yeah, it's important to survive the next 2 games, but they also got to get some momentum built on their offense, because I just think we're in this spot with the defense where they're trying to survive it at least until DeForest Buckner's back. That's the spot they're in based on just the way that they set this up and some of the challenges that they're facing.
Oddly, a game with some stakes coming up here in Tennessee. We'll be down there to cover it. For the Colts Cover-2 podcast, I'm Joel Erickson. This is Nate Atkins. We'll be back with a first impressions podcast, likely from the highway on Sunday after whatever happens in Nashville. Until then, keep track of us on IndyStar.com.